I'd like to call the City of Wheat Ridge Planning Commission for September 19th, 2013 to order. Can I get a roll call for the members, please?
Ann Brinkman, absent. Alan Bucknam.
Present.
Steve Timms.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Dick Matthews, absent. Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Tracy Gildner.
Here.
Monica Duran.
Here.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I move to approve the order of the agenda.
Second.
Can I get a second? Okay. Can I get any discussion? Call for a vote?
Motion approved, 5-0. Motion approved, 6-0.
Is there a motion to approve the order of the minutes for June 13th, 2013? I'm looking for a motion for it to approve the minutes for June 13th, 2013.
I have a motion to approve of the minutes of June 13th, 2013 and August 15th of 2013.
Could we approve them separately since we had
Okay.
people there?
All right, approval of the minutes on June 13th, 2013.
Second.
And then also, oops.
And then can I get a motion to approve the order of the minutes for August 15th, 2013?
Can I make a motion to make an approval of the minutes for August 15th, 2013?
I'll second that.
Oh, hold on, I'm sorry. We're missing some. Motion approved, 3-2 abstaining, Weaver and Ohm. 3-0, 2 abstaining.
The next item on the agenda is a public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on the agenda. There's none? Okay. That would conclude the public forum. Let's go into the next item on the agenda is the public hearings. I open the public hearing for case number WPA-13-01, a resolution recommending adoption of the updated Northwest Sub-Area Plan and by adoption amending the Wheat Ridge Comprehensive Plan, and ask for the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening. Lauren Michalak with the Community Development Department. I'm a planner presenting case WPA 1301. I would like to enter into the record the case file, the draft plan, the contents of this digital presentation, and note that public noticing requirements have been met. The draft plan was included in its entirety in your meeting packet, so for tonight's presentation, I really want to focus on primarily why the update is necessary, and then look briefly at what is and isn't being updated. So we'll start back in 2006, which is when the original sub-area plan was adopted, and at that time it was adopted in reaction to the rail station that was being planned at 50th and Ward Road as part of RTD's Fast Track. So this is a map of some of those Fast Tracks route, and in yellow is the gold line, and the gold line will result in an 11.2 mile commuter rail line that's going to connect Wheat Ridge to downtown Denver. And the purpose of the 2006 sub-area plan, or of any sub-area plan, I suppose, is to focus on a smaller geographic area of the city and provide policy guidance for future development, in this case, around Ward Road Station. And the 2006 plan laid out a vision of transit-oriented development that included higher densities around the station, and a mixed-use area surrounding that, and then generally just a more pedestrian-friendly environment in what is currently kind of an industrial area or historically industrial area. So looking a little bit at the things that have happened with the city and RTD, since 2006, RTD's design plans for the Gold Line and for the Ward Road Station have become much more finalized. Initially, the sub-area plan was used to inform the environmental impact statement for the Gold Line, and that EIS was ultimately completed in 2009. And later, last year, in 2012, RTD completed their station design, so that's what you're seeing, the image on the bottom of the screen. It includes the station platform, the bus pullouts, a surface parking lot, and street extensions east to west here along 50th, and then also on Taft Court. Last year, they completed the station design, and a full funding grant agreement was secured with the Federal Transit Authority. So on the local level, there's actually quite a bit that's happened in the last 7 years, and that's really the primary reason for updating the plan, to incorporate some of those plans and policies that the city has adopted since 2006. So in 2009, as the commission is aware, the city's comprehensive plan was updated, Envision Wheat Ridge, and that's what this image is an excerpt from. The plan identified the Northwest Sub-area as one of 5 priority redevelopment and development areas in the city. And the comp plan built on that original sub-area plan. It recognized the TOD vision for that area, but it added to the mix that if those land uses are going to be mixed, we should also have some emphasis on employment supporting land uses. Also in 2009, the sub-area was included in the I-70 Kipling Corridor Urban Renewal Area, and this map is part of that area, and the sub-area is outlined in red. Also in that year, Wheat Ridge voters approved an exemption from the city charter for, city charter includes height and density caps citywide, and sub-area is one of those parts of the city that's now exempt from those caps. 2010 included the adoption of 2 really important tools from a land use and planning perspective. First was the creation of mixed-use zoning, which was really a key recommendation of the comp plan. So as I mentioned, with the charter exemption, we now allow for taller buildings and a little bit denser development, so the mixed-use zoning is the tool that reflects that. And of the 4 new districts, the mixed-use commercial TOD zone district was really specifically designed for this sub-area for any land within a half mile of the transit station to allow development patterns that support transit and support transit ridership. And 2010 also saw the adoption of the Bike PED, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, which identifies priority bike ped routes and connectivity throughout the city, but also in that sub-area. 2011 was the Streetscape Design Manual, which piggybacks a little on the Bike PED plan. It supports the city's goals of creating more pedestrian-friendly and vibrant commercial streets. And this section that you're seeing is applicable to the sub-area, so any new street would require an 8-foot detached sidewalk and a 6-foot amenity zone. Also in 2011, and really more specific to the sub-area, not citywide, we worked with the EPA Office of Sustainable Communities. We were one of 4 communities in the country selected to work with this EPA team who developed financing recommendations specific to TOD areas. And then most recently, we recognize that any future change in the sub-area is really going to be driven by the private market, and in 2012 we processed a substantial private rezoning. The commission will probably recall the rezoning of the 14-acre former Jolly Rancher site that's shown in blue, this L-shaped, backward L-shaped property, was rezoned to the mixed-use TOD zone district. So this is it's a slightly abbreviated list, but it's demonstrating the fact that we've done quite a bit in the last 7 years, and that an update to the sub-area plan is really warranted to incorporate these plans and policies that will guide to future development, not only in the city, but also in this sub-area, and also to reflect those updated designs for the Gold Line. So that said, this is relatively a minor update. What we're not touching is the vision for the sub-area, so we still keep that TOD mixed use ideal. The plan continues to be a long-term document, so the overall goal is to continue to provide a framework that's flexible for developers, but clear enough to guide our future zoning and development decisions. So a quick summary of what's updated and what's new. We want to make sure that the plan is comprehensive and current, so we have new images, new maps, updated the bike ped map to reflect that plan. The boundary is slightly modified, and we've crossed off quite a number of our implementation items since 2006. The two newest items to the plan include chapters, I believe they're 8 and 9, 7 and 8, sorry. The economic development incentives and the financing mechanisms, which are really going to be helpful tools and resources, not only for the city, but also for private investors. The one substantive change that I do want to touch on briefly relates to the future land use map. So we'll just spend just a minute or two looking at this graphic. First, as I mentioned, the boundary of the sub-area is slightly modified. So the two changes are the northeast corner. The residential neighborhood here on Swadley and Sims was excluded because that's really a pretty established neighborhood. We don't anticipate a lot of changes there. And then the area that was added to the boundary is south here, south of Ridge Road. It's a commercial and industrial area that wasn't included in 2006, so that's been added. The second change really relates to the properties that are south of the tracks. In 2006, the properties that are shown in red were designated as office and industrial uses, and that's largely what's there today. But given that this is a long-range document and that those properties are within a quarter mile of the transit station, they have now been designated mixed use and employment. So we know it may be more employment, it may be more housing, but that change will allow some more flexibility. And it's also appropriate given the bicycle and pedestrian improvements that could come to the corridor. There's planned improvements on Tabor Street, and this map is also showing a potential future connection between those properties to the south and the station platform in the form of a pedestrian bridge if that was to be funded and built. So the north half of the tracks remains pretty much the same. We have a better sense of where the station layout is going to be, and that's reflected. The pink is denoting mixed use TOD, and we continue to recognize that there will need to be two sort of transitional areas. So to the east, more of a residential buffer transition, and then to the west along Ward, a commercial transition that recognizes the more volume of vehicular traffic along Ward. So those would be sort of the most substantive changes in the update. As far as process, we did have 2 public meetings earlier in the year. We had a site tour through the sub-area, and then last month we presented the draft plan that you've read to City Council, and next month we will present the plan again and forward your recommendation to Council at a hearing on the 14th. And that concludes my summary. I know I didn't touch on all the content, so if you have any questions, Ken and I are welcome, or we'll take them.
Okay, Commissioner Buckton, do you have any questions?
No.
Commissioner Weaver?
No.
Commissioner Gilman?
I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Timms?
I do have one question for staff regarding parking. The plan says that originally there'll be 290 parking spaces and then potentially expanding to 440 once the site reaches 90% utilization. That expansion, is that on RTD's existing lot, or would that be I guess a private owner lot to the north to add that, to go from 290 to 440?
I think they would need, well, no, I'm not sure how much.
Or is it all contained within RTD, the parcel of land, or would
No,
that be
I
on?
think they'd need to acquire additional property if it was going to be a surface lot. Our end goal is to have a parking structure that can be shared with the station and then with any retailers or residents in the sub-area. And that's something that we'd look at once we started to hit that threshold. Do you want to elaborate on that at all, Ken?
No, that's all correct. It would be to the north of that existing parking that's delineated on this site plan. So that's the 290 there.
Oh, so this is only 290 shown on
Correct.
that one? Okay.
Yep.
And then it also says that on-street parking is available for West 50th Place. on page 14. Is that parking at this time anticipated to be free, or are there going to be meters, or has that been established yet?
I don't know that we've had that discussion. At this point, all parking, on-street parking in the city is free.
Okay.
So we haven't had that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Duran?
Do you have any idea what the average height of some of those commercial buildings will be around there? You know, what are
What
they
they
looking
would
at?
be?
Yeah, what are they looking
I
at?
think a lot of that's going to be driven by the private market. I can tell you if the properties were to rezone to mixed-use TOD, they'd be allowed to exceed that 50-foot height limit. Those heights, I have to grab my code.
Okay.
So in the mixed-use TOD zone district, a single-use building is permitted to have a maximum height of 6 stories or 90 feet. And of course, you'll recall that as you get taller, there are required step backs, so they will get further from the street. And then a mixed-use building would be permitted to go as tall as 8 stories or 118 feet.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any more questions from the commissioners?
So the proposal is that it will be all some sort of mixed use, yes? So we're potentially talking about 8 stories for most of it?
That would be allowed, yes, certainly. I think, so we recognize, obviously there's only one property right now that's zoned mixed use, the Jolly Rancher site. If people were to come in and rezone, or if we had the discussion again about doing a legislative rezoning, then there'd be the possibility of being under that zone district, and then of course, it'd be the private market that would decide how tall those buildings eventually would be constructed.
Okay.
But that's what's permitted by the
But
zoning.
potentially, both the pink and the dark red areas could be 8 stories.
If they were zoned mixed use
Mixed use.
TOD, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I have another question. I'm sorry. You may have highlighted, I apologize. When is this station scheduled to be open and operational?
2016 is the goal right now.
Okay. And then has the city been seeing any increased interest in this neighborhood with that line now under construction in terms of potential redevelopment? Are you at liberty? It doesn't have to be specific, but just general interest for new development in this area?
We have. I mean, I know that actually prior to the property being rezoning, we had an out-of-state developer take a pretty hard look at the property to do some sort of a mixed-use development. At the time, there was a charter restriction in place that was kind of a non-starter for them. The people that own the Jolly Rancher site, IBC Holdings, that's a holding company that's based here in Denver with outside equity interests that hold this particular parcel. That's actively on the market at this point, but they had actually made a run at trying to assemble additional parcels up there. They had actually a pretty grand plan of doing development around the entire station. Excuse me. Their feeling was that they had to secure a few more parcels to kind of implement the entire vision that they had for the area, and they weren't able to negotiate successfully on price on the additional parcels that they made offers on. So at this point, they're marketing it for another developer to come in. So yeah, there has been some interest. And I would note also, just while I'm on the mic here, that they also created a special metropolitan district. So that's one other tool that we have in place to kind of implement the recommendations of the plan. So on the IBC Holdings, the former Jolly Rancher site, there's a metropolitan district in place, which establishes kind of a financing mechanism for building some of the public improvements. They had factored in construction of the parking structure into their service plan, as well as construction of that bike ped crossing of the tracks.
Great, thank you so much.
Are there any more questions for staff? I would like to now open up the citizens forum. Are there any citizens that have signed up to speak for this particular case? Please state your name and address.
Good evening. Nancy Snow, 11155 West 40th. And I live, you'll think of that address and think, what in the name of heaven is that woman doing here? I live across the creek, I mean way across the creek, on 40th Avenue, but I and all my neighbors look at this site. Not lately this week, since we didn't have any sun, but this is a very, very important site, I think, in terms of visual effect on this city. Now, I'm all in favor of the light rail station. I think it was wonderful that we got it. People will be able to go downtown without necessarily, can you hear me? Is this loud enough? Yeah. Driving a car. But I think it's possible the way you build and what you allow there can do more harm to the city than you can possibly think of. The other thing I'd like to comment on, you wonder, why are my neighbors not here? Why not? Well, years ago, when I was a lot younger, I'd have gone out and got a petition, and I don't have the energy to do that anymore. So I'm sort of a one-man person. My family who lives next door would be here, but they both work nights. But let me tell you what my two concerns are. One is lighting. We already are truly offended. Are any of you live where you can see the lights on the freeway, the new ones that are like, they are so offensive, you can't believe it. Well, you can't do anything about that. But we are very worried about the possibility of a lot of light on the RTD parking. I think, and I know you have all driven by 6th Avenue with all the car lots, and those lights can be seen for miles. I brought that up, by the way, I went to the neighborhood meetings and nothing that we said ever got in this plan. But I hope you will see if you can make some kind of lighting limitations. Obviously, you can't require the parking lot to turn their lights off at night or they'll have theft. But if we can have some kind of limits on how much light is and that it's directed down, because it's going to be very offensive, not just for people like me where I live. I think you're going to be shocked about how far that light goes. My second issue, though, and those of you who know me, this is always what I talk about, is height. I'm very concerned. I'm concerned about bulk of buildings there, but particularly of height. I'm very aware that the voters of this city did vote to take the height and density limits off the charter, not everywhere, but including this area. And then it was up to the city council to actually change the zoning ordinance. And they created a mixed-use district, which I've never totally understood, but I understand they can still, even within that, have some height limits. Now I want to go back to, again, what's important. I meant to bring it. I have this new city budget, and one of the goals it says is a more attractive Wheat Ridge. We have a couple things in this city that are attractive. Actually, most of them are man-made. People have nice houses. Sometimes the streets are pretty. Our parks are pretty. Our trees are pretty. But we have two natural things. One is the green belt, and the other is the mountains. The mountains are very important for people who live here and people who drive through. So it isn't just me and people like me who are lucky enough to live up on the mountain. Everybody who drives on I-70 is going to be able to see that spot. And if you put a big building up there, you're not going to have the view of the mountain that's there now. It is going to be a real shock. So I'm talking to you now to not wait till one day they're building a big building up there, and they got about 3 stories up and some framework, and people start screaming, what are they doing up there? You need to do something about the limits now. Now, I'm looking at this plan, but I wish you had, do you have the plan you had at the neighborhood meetings where you really clearly divided the north and the south part? Well, never mind. The thing is, as you come down the hill, if you drive up Ward Road and come down the hill, it changes, it goes down pretty quickly. So I think tall buildings on the lower part aren't going to do much. But a tall building on the old Jolly Rancher site is going to be really sad. It's just going to ruin it. And as I say, you can see that site, not just where I live, everybody driving on I-70, lots of other properties. The new park, you can get a view of that area. And a lot of people won't notice till it's gone. So I left the room for a minute, but I heard our planning director talk about what I always hear about is that certain developers looked at this site or that site and they didn't want to build, they didn't want to buy because our height and density limits stopped them. You know, I know we want economic development, but you know, some of us say, hooray, you know. Do we have to be the place in the city that's got the tallest building? Do we really want to look like Denver? Obviously, we want more taxes, but you only get taxes from the bottom floor. I don't think we're ever going to have anything that has commercial above the first floor. We're not going to have a big department store like New York City. So even this mixed use, you're only going to get money if that's what you want from the lower floor. So I'd like to ask somebody to, you know, make a motion. I've got the drawing here, but I can't say it that way. That the lower, by which I mean the southern part of this area, have a height limitation of something. Now, can I ask the planning director, you may have said that when I was out of the room, what is the height limit in this draft?
The height limit is aligned with what we did for our mixed-use commercial TOD zoning.
For what?
The mixed-use commercial TOD zoning, which is on the books, but only approved for one parcel of land in this area. But that allows 6 stories for single-use development and 8 stories as an incentive to do mixed-use development. I don't know what the height is for 8 stories, but the height for 6 stories is 90 feet.
And 8 stories is about 120 feet, 122 feet, is that right?
I have to look at the zoning code to see what
Everybody,
we allow.
take a breath here. You're voting on something important tonight. Would you like a 22-foot building up there? And by the way, I mean, I can't do anything about it because they passed it, but I've never understood the rationale that you get an extra 2 stories if it's mixed use. And I know somebody who was on that committee, and they swore that's not what the committee recommended. But I don't know what the value would be. In fact, I can see absolutely no value of an 8-story building or even a 6-story building on that very, very important site. Is that about right? 120, 120?
It's 118.
118, oh well, okay. It's terrible. Anyway, I just wish you would take a bold step. I know it's nice, we have very good planning staff, and this is what they plan, and it sounds great. But if this goes through, someday everybody's going to be very, very sorry, and it will be too late. And I personally don't think it's going to add anything to our tax base anyway. I mean, property tax, but sales tax, you know, an 8-story building isn't going to give you much sales tax. Thanks. Anybody have a question of me? No? No.
So you are in support of a 6-story?
Am I?
Well, yes,
Oh,
are
no.
you?
No.
Okay. Can you clarify what
Well,
you're saying?
let me go back to the charter change. Before the charter, you could only had 3 stories for residential and 5 for commercial, which I guess I was in favor of. I mean, even back then, I don't think anybody thought of every spot in the city. And so the city had the right to take that limit off in various places in the city, hunks of the city, actually. But I'm very sad that they did for this particular site. Not the lower part, but the upper part. So no, I'm not in favor of 6 stories, and God forbid 8 stories is a nightmare. I don't know how much authority you have. If you'd even go down to 5 stories, because even though the charter allowed the city to take the height limits off in various parts of the city, it didn't mandate that they come off everywhere. So you have to say, what is this going to accomplish? What is this going to give our city? You know, the big thing always is economic development, by which they mean more money. And I don't think you're going to get it from that. Obviously, it's nice to have people to use the light rail, but I would hate to see an 8-story building here. I mean, it doesn't look like Wheat Ridge. We have one big building, which to me is a nightmare. I had to drive by it on 38th Avenue all the years I worked downtown, and I wish it weren't there. It's like a sore thumb sticking up. And I've seen other parts of the world. I don't want to ramble too much, but go to Hawaii, which was beautiful once, and there's a couple islands left. Other than that, it looks like every city looks alike. You know, it's got great big buildings. Denver has great big buildings. There isn't any sun anywhere, you know, and I really think it harms the city. I think it does the opposite of what you'd like to do, is what the plan is, make the city more attractive and bring in more taxes. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens that have signed up or wish to speak? I'd like to close the public forum. Could I have the staff address the one question about criteria for lights, the light spillage, what the codes are?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have design standards, lighting standards that address limiting the light that floods off of the property line. We should note that the plan that we're looking at tonight has been relatively finalized, but that property is zoned industrial, and so a transit station on industrial zone property needs to go through a special use permit process. So RTD still has a land use entitlement to go through with us. And I suspect as part of that, we would include a photometric, either then or a building permit, so we can get a better look at what that lighting's doing, particularly the parking lot lights. We do have maximum heights also for parking lot lights.
Are there any other questions for staff?
I just was going to say that I'm going to vote for this. I live right off the frontage road. I don't notice the lights or the cars. I do hear the railroad, and I'm on the other side of the street, and I like it. I think that right now the eyesore of Jolly Ranchers being gone is terrible. I mean, when you drive by there, it's not what I grew up when I went to Drake or anything. And I think it gives the city a chance to bring in new businesses, new people to live here, and bring people to the District 4 to help boost our economy.
I would entertain a motion. Yes.
Is there any type of modification we can do, or even suggest that maybe the higher buildings be put lower, you know, on one end than the other? I mean, is that something that we can even do on Planning Commission, suggest?
It certainly is. I think it's important to note that what you're acting on tonight is not a regulatory document, it's an advisory document, so it's certainly something that's an important policy document for the city. Ultimately, what would control what could be built on the property is the zoning. Mm-hmm. And as Lauren has noted, only the Jolly Rancher site at this point has been rezoned to that to the MUC TOD, which allows those higher heights. I would also just add, Lauren had mentioned the step back requirements for taller buildings. We do also have a maximum height of 4 stories adjacent within proximity to existing single-family residential neighborhoods. So there are some additional, and there's also a landscape buffer requirement between 4-story buildings and existing residential. So we are trying to be sensitive to the fact that to the north and to the east of the station of the TOD area, there are some established residential land uses that we want to be sensitive to, and in fact that applies in all of our mixed-use districts, whether it be the mixed-use TOD or the mixed-use commercial or the mixed-use neighborhood. So we do understand that the higher building heights are, you know, impactful, mm-hmm. and want to be sensitive to established neighborhoods.
There's really not too many. Is there just about 2 residential homes right there in that area, or is there any residential homes? They've pretty much been turned into businesses, haven't they?
To the east, there's a kind of a older 50s era kind of ranch subdivision.
Yeah, he's got the llamas out there and stuff.
And then to the north, there's a mix of, on the other side of 52nd, there's some single-family homes, there's some condos, there's some office buildings.
Okay.
You know, as much as I support revitalizing areas and looking toward the future and everything, I just have a hard time trying to make a decision on this one, only because I just have so many questions regarding the height and how high we can go. I mean, I want to see progress, and I want to see us do something with that area so it's not just sitting there. But I still have a lot of questions, so I don't think I could support it at this time. But that's just how I feel. I don't know how you feel, Amanda, or anyone else.
I guess for me, I realizing this is an advisory document, this is not law. I'm supportive of the plan. I also would be, I think it'd be a bad precedent especially after we approve that mixed use zone district over the existing Jolly Rancher site, and all of a sudden now potentially, have a conflict in place for what that site allows. And then just knowing that the bulk standards, as the director referenced, are going to dictate how you've got parking, you've got setbacks, you've got landscaping, all those put together, plus the overall building, I guess, structure, if you will. Denver's building a lot of these 5 to 6 story condo type of apartment type of buildings. Once you get above 6 stories, the whole building kind of structure starts to change. And so I'm not convinced that just because you allow it, you're automatically going to see, I guess, that an 8-story solid roof canopy over this entire area. I think that the market and the building design is going to dictate varying heights. But I do think that the bulk standards in general are going to dictate also what can be built. And I don't think, again, that we're going to see just a proliferation of 8 stories. I do think this should be a special place. I do think it acts as a key gateway. It should be an urban center that it espouses all those proper planning principles, both short-term and long-term. Does have an opportunity to really set this area of Wheat Ridge apart. I am supportive of this plan.
Is there an opportunity, I guess I'm trying to understand if at some point altitude does take that conversation ever comes up, because it is, if any of you have ever driven in on, I think it's 285, there's some pretty large building developments, and it does seem a lot taller when they're up on a hillside. And so I was just curious, because I also agree with what Commissioner Timms is saying as far as the place, and I just think it's pretty exciting what's happening. But at that point that a developer comes in and we're reviewing plans and things like that, is there a place where that can be suggested of, because it's just one of those things where 8 stories seems perfectly okay to me at the base of that hill. And as you go up that hill, it's going to seem like 10 or 11 stories. I mean, if you've driven up that hill on Ward Road. And I just, it doesn't make me feel like I'm against the plan, but I'm just wondering if later on down we will be able to have that conversation as developers come in. But I'm just curious.
Wouldn't any type of rezoning of those industrial properties have that opportunity, I guess, potentially to visit, especially if they were rezoning to some type of either planned development or mixed use? I guess that would be under Planning Commission and City Council scrutiny.
So the rezoning, if it was to rezone to mixed use, you would see that request. If it went to, you wouldn't necessarily see site plans. So once it's a mixed use zone district, the site plans are approved administratively. If it was rezoned to planned development, you'd see more information on the building heights. And then in terms of sort of bulk plan questions, we don't have the view shed ordinances, for example, that like the city of Denver has. We really just have the design standards that Ken was describing. So I don't know that we have anything in place right now to address building height compared to the topography of where that building is located.
But I guess I'm just asking, does that make sense? I mean, it's a potentially really great area that could potentially look a lot taller than I think we think it could look up that hill. Sure. And I'm really supportive of mixed use and all of these things, but thinking about what 8 stories would look potentially, and I realize that this is all potential, we don't know what's going to happen, but I'm also thinking as a developer would, as if I'm building apartments or whatever, I'm going to want to maximize that space as well. So is view shed something we can think about then upon that? I mean, my understanding of mixed use or PUD, which one, is that there's actually a specific site plan where it's regulated to that thing, correct? Where the plan,
For mixed use, if you meet all of our standards and design criteria, then you can be approved. For plan development, there's certainly a little more discretion. And I suspect, the intent of creating these mixed use standards was to have some consistency for the city to know sort of what we're expecting as a product and for developers. So I'm surmising that we'll have more people interested in the mixed use zone district up here than a plan development. I don't know that that answers your question about when we can negotiate viewshed.
I would suggest that if we want to incorporate viewshed into height criteria, we need to actually revisit the actual mixed-use zoning code or the other zoning codes that would permit higher developments. It's not something we should probably do on a piecemeal basis because, as Lauren said, we want to have consistency, throughout, whatever zoned mixed use, TOD or mixed use neighborhood. We want developers to have that confidence that if they are going in and purchasing a particular parcel, they know what standards they have to meet. So I think that I would suggest that if that's something we want to talk about, we should definitely have a conversation about it, but it probably relates to, for example, those particular zoning classifications overall, as opposed to a specific area. That's just my opinion.
One question I had for staff was, did the conversation with the developer, when did they come in the picture, like before or after the height, the 6-8 stories,
The developer that I mentioned from out of state that was looking at the property in general, kind of the whole area around the station, was probably in the 2006, 2007 timeframe when the idea of the station being there was starting to take shape and in a pretty formal way through the RTD environmental process. And then IBC Holdings acquired the property, formerly the Jolly Rancher site, at about the same time frame in 2006. Their original intent, actually, they are by and large a light industrial developer, and their intent at the time, not really even knowing of the plans for the station, was to build some light industrial product, and they ultimately didn't pursue that, and then ultimately kind of bought into the concept of doing a TOD, but as I mentioned, didn't think like they had control of enough land to really realize the vision that they wanted to achieve.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for staff? Does anybody have a motion?
I've got a motion. I move to adopt the resolution 02-2013, a resolution recommending adoption of the updated Northwest Suburban Plan as an amendment to the Wheat Ridge Comprehensive Plan, envision Wheat Ridge, and forwarding said recommendations to the Wheat Ridge City Council. As exhibits 1, resolution 2013, Northwest Suburban Plan 2013 update.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? And it was, just to clarify, it wasn't the suburban plan, it was the sub area.
Oh. I'm really tired.
Any discussion? Call for vote.
Motion approved, 5-1. Commissioner Duran voting no.
Okay, I'd like to open the public hearing for case number ZOA-13-01, amendments to Chapter 26, Zoning and Development Code concerning retail marijuana regulations, and ask for the staff report.
Again, for the record, Lauren Michalak, Community Development Department, and I would like to enter the case file, the draft ordinance, and the contents of this digital presentation. Posting public noticing requirements, again, have been met. All right, before we look closely at the proposed ordinance, I want to start with a little bit of background information that again explains sort of why we're here with this ordinance, some state actions and local actions. In November of last year, Colorado voters approved Amendment 64, which amended the state constitution and legalized the purchase, sale, possession, growing, production, consumption, and use of marijuana and marijuana products for adults 21 and over. Amendment 64 included certain dates by which the state needed to implement the licensing of retail marijuana establishments, or RMEs. We're distinguishing retail marijuana from medical marijuana. And this timeline is showing those dates. And so far, the state has met most of these deadlines. Earlier this year in May, the legislature adopted the Retail Marijuana Code. That gave sort of the outline of how Amendment 64 would be implemented, and it also established the Department of Revenue as the state licensing authority for retail marijuana. They are currently also the authority for medical marijuana industry. That department in July adopted emergency rules, and then just a couple weeks ago adopted the permanent enforcement rules that provide the details of how the retail marijuana industry will be regulated. At the state level, applications for retail marijuana licenses will be accepted beginning on October 1st, and then those businesses may begin operating on January 1st of 2014. Meantime, at the local level, Amendment 64 allows municipalities to either ban retail marijuana businesses outright or to regulate them. And in March, City Council instituted a moratorium to allow time to consider more appropriate policies. And then last month, we met with City Council as a staff, and there was consensus to allow retail marijuana establishments and to regulate them in a manner similar to our current rules for medical marijuana. So as far as timing, after tonight's hearing, Council will have a public hearing for this ordinance on Monday. So looking at this ordinance, again, a little background. The city's attorney's office has drafted the ordinance because most of it is located outside of the zoning code. So most of it's in Chapter 11, and that's the portion of city code which regulates licensing and business regulations. So for the past 2 years, we've allowed and regulated medical marijuana, and the retail marijuana is going to look the same, which means that we have 4 types of businesses, or RMEs: a retail store, a grow or cultivation facility, an infused products manufacturer, and then a testing facility. The city's tax and licensing division will again be the local licensing authority with support from community development and police departments. Standalone cultivation facilities have not been allowed and will continue to be prohibited. Any cultivation facility will need to be contiguous with either a retail store or an infused products manufacturer. On the zoning side, the one portion of this ordinance that does affect Chapter 26 is our permitted use chart. And so these types of retail marijuana businesses are proposed to be permitted only in the Commercial 1, the C1, and Industrial Employment Zone districts. And then Chapter 11 will include certain minimum buffering requirements. So for stores, they'd be required to maintain an 1,000-foot separation from schools, residential daycares, and drug treatment centers, and then a 3/4 mile separation between any retail or medical marijuana store. And then the only exception to that 3/4 mile distance is for co-location. In the initial phase-in, the state will allow existing medical licensees to convert in part or in whole to a retail license, so co-locating retail and medical, and our local ordinance has proposed to allow that type of co-location. So that's a lot of text and language, and we'll look at a map quickly to see what do those regulations really pan out to be. This map was included in the meeting packet, and it shows the existing medical marijuana businesses. But because, again, the proposed ordinance is going to parallel those, it's kind of a helpful exhibit. So right now, we have 5 medical marijuana retail centers, and the gray circles are indicating that 3/4 mile buffer. The other colors on the map, the red and purplish colors, are the C1 and IE zone districts, so the eligible zone districts. And then the striped orange polygons are showing the schools. I do want to point out that this map is not showing eligible locations, so this does not mean that the whole southern half of the city could open itself to having additional stores. The unique component of our ordinance has been and continues to be that 3/4 mile buffer includes retail stores both inside of Wheat Ridge and outside of Wheat Ridge. And we don't maintain a database, but we know that Lakewood, Edgewater, Denver, and Mountain View all have right now medical marijuana retail centers, and so that's effectively prohibiting new businesses of that nature from being in sort of our southeast and southwest quadrants. We think that we've pretty much met our capacity. I don't know that there's any more eligible locations right now, but this is essentially what those regulations look like in practice. So we are recommending approval of the ordinance. These regulations are consistent with how we deal with medical marijuana businesses, and I think they result in a system that allow the new industry and then ensure consistency with surrounding land uses. So as I mentioned, council will hear this ordinance on Monday. The moratorium expires on November 1st, or with the effective date of the ordinance if it's approved. So I can answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Bucknam?
I just want to make, ask for a little clarification. I do know, as you say, there are a number of existing medical marijuana establishments in Edgewater, Mountain View, Denver, and Lakewood. But if we're talking about a 1,000-foot slash, 750-foot?
3/4 mile.
3/4 mile, thank you. Radius, there definitely is the potential for additional facilities, within Wheat Ridge. I think the southeast portion, like you said, is definitely kind of precluded from that because of the existing establishments outside the city limits. And I'm glad that the planning and that the city is taking those into account, because obviously, we're surrounded by other municipalities. It's good to take those into account. Do you have any maps on hand that would show those existing out of municipality businesses?
We don't maintain that list or that map. We don't have a good pulse on sort of when those change. So typically the way that we process applications, and I imagine the way we'd continue to, is if somebody comes to us with an address, before they've paid for a business license, we can do a quick survey. We've been calling it sort of a preliminary determination. So what is it zoned? Does it look like it's within 3/4 mile of one of our existing businesses in Wheat Ridge? And does it look like it's 1,000 feet from the school daycare and drug treatment center? For the most part, it's on the applicant's responsibility to determine if there's something in a neighboring neighborhood or a neighboring municipality. When they do come in for the business license, what we've been doing thus far is our tax division has been contacting the tax division for the neighboring municipality and confirming sort of who they have as active businesses. It's just a lot of administrative time to keep that list current, and I don't know that it's helpful if it's not current.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks.
Commissioner Weaver? Commissioner Gilman? Commissioner Timms?
I do have a question. I live close to Mountain View, and I think next to police revenue, I think medical marijuana is Mountain View's second highest source of revenue now. But I have a question on section 11-416, the prohibited locations.
Okay.
C says no retail marijuana store shall be located within 3/4 mile of another retail marijuana store, so I understand that. I don't understand D, though. So it says no retail marijuana store shall be located unless within a medical marijuana, unless the retail marijuana store and the medical marijuana center are operating a dual retail business.
Sure.
Is that saying that, what is that saying?
So that is saying that if you want to co-locate, so if you're an existing business and you want to sell not only to medical marijuana card holders, but also to the general public, you can do that and your two businesses don't have to be 3/4 of a mile from each other. They
So,
could be
so,
under
y-
one
so
roof.
you could have a retail mixed with a medical marijuana that is closer than 3/4 of a mile to another retail
Just
and
in the
medical
same
marijuana?
building. So any of these 5 locations on this map, for instance, could apply for their license to sell retail marijuana. So it'd be one business, one licensee, one roof. You wouldn't know the difference. We'd have only 5 dots here still.
Okay, so
They
it's not a
can
conflict with
co-locate.
C, I guess?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to double check. I was a little confused. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Ham? Any other questions? I'd like to open up the citizens forums. Are there any citizens that have signed up to speak?
No.
Seeing none, I will close the public forum, citizens forum. I would entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 11 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws by adding a new article, is that 13, concerning retail marijuana and making certain amendments to Chapter 26, zoning and development, in association therewith.
I second the motion.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm in favor of this motion. I like the fact that it basically mirrors the medical marijuana, zoning and planning that we had already, that everyone here in this room and also the council had put so much thought into. And so I'm glad to see that sort of parallel planning moving forward.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Call for a vote.
Motion approved, 6-0.
Are there any other items?
Just schedule-wise, the first meeting in October will be canceled. I think it's the 2nd or 3rd. And we have a tentative case on the 2nd meeting in October. So we'll let you know as we get closer.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Call for vote.
Motion approved, 6-0.